Investigation from the Washington Post is taking a closer look at the nonprofit organization, the Federalist Society, and its executive vice president, Leonard Leo. The Post reports that Leo, who has served as an advisor to President Trump on judicial nominations, has also worked to raise millions of dollars to promote conservative justices and issues. President Trump had praise for Leo in the early days of his administration. Here's what the president said while meeting with his Supreme Court team in February 2017, just a day after nominating then Judge Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court.
I appreciate all of the help in deciding who to pick for the United States Supreme Court. And Leonard, you were fantastic, all of your work. And Jim DeMint, I don't know if Jim's here or not, but they were great, heritage. And you really did, you really helped.
Let's bring in Lisa Graves. She is the president of the board of the progressive watchdog group, the Center for Media and Democracy. She is also the former chief counsel for nominations for the Senate Judiciary Committee under Senator Patrick Leahy. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So if you could start off by walking us through the role that Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society play in influencing judicial nominations.
Well, as a researcher for the American Constitution Society, I've been looking into the effort to capture the courts. And reading that Washington Post story is really astonishing because it really tells the tale for the American people to see how this one person has played such a crucial role, Leonard Leo, in not just choosing people who are not going to just uphold the law, but who are basically chosen to overturn the law, and then how he's also orchestrating millions and millions of dollars through these different front groups to try to push through the most controversial nominees we've seen in generations onto that court, and he's also getting rich in the process. And so it's been an astonishing thing to really see that story unfold, and all the details that really document how this person has no disclosure rules, no transparency about who he's raising funds from, even though he's the person who's choosing who Trump chooses from, and then executing all this money to force them onto our highest court. It's a huge scandal.
Well, as we mentioned, you served as the chief counsel for nominations to the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont. Can you give us a sense of the role activists like Leo, as well as those on the left, played in judicial nominations during your tenure?
Well, we certainly saw a number of attacks by groups that it turns out were connected to Leo in hindsight. And we saw the emergence of a group called the Judicial Confirmation Network that's now known as the Judicial Crisis Network. I think one of the fundamental differences between the left and the right on judicial nominations is that progressive groups, which are membership groups, are representing citizens who want to make sure the Voting Rights Act is not overturned, want to make sure that settled rights and environmental protections are not overturned. That's part of the fundamental duty of a judge, is to be fair and to follow the law, follow the precedents. But what's happening on the right is there's a multi-million-dollar effort. In fact, the Post tallied it at nearly $250 million to basically get judges on the court who are not devoted to following those laws, who want to overturn them. And they're being handpicked by someone to do so, who's then making money himself personally, and also spending and deploying massive amounts of dark money from anonymous billionaires to pack our courts. That really is, I think, the biggest scandal surrounding our United States Supreme Court in my lifetime.
Well, the Washington Post cites a recording of a speech that Leo gave to the Council for National Policy, where he said in part, quote, "We're going to have to understand that judicial confirmations these days are more like political campaigns." What do you make of that?
I think that is an interesting quote, because right now the issue of judicial nominations is even less regulated than our broken political campaign situation, where we have all this dark money being spent by billionaires who are trying to influence the election, and their donations are not disclosed. In elections, at least the candidates have to disclose what money comes to them. In this situation, in terms of the judicial nominations, where there's no transparency, these groups that are spending money to push through these controversial nominees with the hope that they're going to overturn the law, they're being treated like political campaigns, but none of the political campaign rules apply to them, not even the baseline transparency that I think would apply to PAC-like activity.
Well, how are fights over judicial nominations impacting how both Republican and Democratic lawmakers rally their supporters?
Well, I think that when you look at this last nomination battle, what you see is how the Post tells the story about how some of that money was spent to basically try to shore up a candidate who I think was unfit for the bench for a number of reasons. Instead of having a situation where we're choosing the best people for the bench, people who have records of tremendous fairness, who aren't extremely controversial, who don't have an agenda, and aren't chosen with the view that they're going to overturn our laws. Instead, we have these people who are being chosen with the hope and determination that they will overturn our laws, and millions are being spent. And so the Republicans think this is a win for them because it motivates their base. I think the American people on the left are waking up to what's happening, that there's this tremendous multi-million-dollar dark money campaign being executed by the right to pack our courts and basically overturn a century of precedent. Those are the words of Leonard Leo. He says we're on the precipice of changing our laws, a century of laws, but the American people have not had a public debate about that, and that's certainly not what was being said by those nominees at the Senate Judiciary Committee when they pledged to follow the law.
All right, Lisa Graves. Lisa, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.